It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 657 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. I have two great conversations lined up for you today. Joining me first will be Doug Sandler. Doug is one of the nice guys in business. In fact, the return on investment, the ROI of being nice in business and sales, is what you'll hear us talk about. Following my conversation with Doug is another fun conversation with my partner in crime, Bridget Gleason. Today's topic, RESPECT. That's right, respect. Trust me, I'm not going to sing it, but we're going to talk about the importance of respect in sales. Now, today's show is brought to you in part by our friends at Discover.org. The Discover.org platform is a game changer for sales and marketing professionals. This feature-rich sales intelligence platform is supported by more than 250 researchers who continually update contact data and provide account-specific insight to help sales and marketing teams break ahead of the pack. See the product live at discoverorg.com/schedule-demo. Okay, joining me on the first segment on Accelerate this week is Doug Sandler. Doug is the author of the book titled Nice Guys Finish First. He's the co-host of the Nice Guys on Business podcast. And if that weren't enough, he is also CEO and Podcastologist. Interesting title, at the TurnKey Podcast Company, where they help companies put on their own podcasts. Now, this is Doug's second visit to Accelerate, and our conversation today is an extension to what we discussed on his first trip to Accelerate, meaning what's the return on investment on being nice? What's the ROI on being nice? And if you spend any time on social media, you might think that perhaps being nice is a luxury you can't afford these days. Well, hey, that's definitely not the case, and we're going to dig into that. We'll talk about also how to enhance your professionalism, because how you present yourself, this is all part of your brand of being nice. And as Doug is quoting someone saying, if you don't think nice guys finish first, then you don't know where the finish line is. All right, here we go. Doug Sandler, welcome to the show.
It is good to be back. You look you look younger. How is that even possible?
Well, thank you very much. It's been a year, almost exactly a year since we saw each other.
Wow. Are you on episode like 1 million yet?
We're closing in on a million very slowly. Very slowly. But yeah, I mean, you as well. I mean, a very thriving podcast and one I enjoy. Love the topic about nice guys in business. You know, it's so funny when I think about that is with all the angst and Sturm und Drang that's out there and sort of the atmosphere in general about our polarized society. Is I decided to come up with a new categorization of people rather than left or right, or rather than, liberal or conservative or Democrat GOP. Are they a good person or not?
Oh, I love that. Right? I have a client of mine who just started doing a podcast, and the name of his podcast is called Day in a Canoe. And the way that his test to determine whether he wants to do business with someone, his name is Nathan. The way that Nathan determines if he wants to do business is this someone that I could actually spend a day in a canoe with without either killing or driving him or driving me crazy. And it's such a great barometer for, is this somebody that I actually want to do business with? Can I spend a day in a canoe with this guy?
Yeah, well, I mean, this idea of people just being nice. I mean, I can understand people having different opinions, and I think it's important for people to hold different opinions but we seem to have lost this ability to be civil in our disagreements, and not just in politics, but trolls are everywhere these days on social media and so on. Is that for me? It's like, God, is this person just a good person?
I find a lot that, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So I was just going to say what I find really interesting about what you're saying in the direction, and you did mention it just momentarily there, it was talking about technology and social media. I think there is such a huge level of what we perceive as anonymity in social media that oftentimes people will say, my band teacher in 5th grade used to say, be sure that brain is engaged before putting mouth in gear. And it's like, yeah, I get it. Think about what you're about to say because it's going to live forever on social media. But how about, is it just the right thing to say? Can you just filter that so that you're not attacking someone and actually presenting it from a slightly different perspective instead?
Yeah. And I to me, again, there's not saying anything about a political belief, but on social media yesterday, when based on the time you and I are recording this, which is few weeks before people here will actually hear it, but there was a national commentator that in a social media tweet made fun of the fact that one of the students from Parkland, who's one of the prime spokesperson, got rejected from 4 colleges. I mean, it's like, what? To me, that was like, okay, not a good person, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if you're just a human being. Why would motivate you to do that type of thing?
And how is it even related? How does it even fit into?
Disagree with what they stand for. That's fine, but don't demonize and then denigrate somebody because they didn't get into UCLA and Harvard. It's like, if he had applied after the shooting and today, I'm sure they're probably reaching out to him.
Right. Agreed.
So, I mean, it's just like, why can't we just be good? Because I think this really ties into, this is not only a sales and marketing show and leadership show, and there's great ROI on being nice. You wrote a book called Nice Guys Finish First, and your podcast is The Nice Guys on Business, and it's, to me, this is really I think something people really have to revisit when they look in the mirror is are they just being a good person? I think that can take you so far in life if you do that.
I think oftentimes having this badge of nice sometimes is seen as a sign of weakness or a sign of someone that can't be sharp or biting. Or if you happen to look in the last couple of weeks or even the last 600 episodes, every one of our episodes proudly carries the explicit badge. It's not like we are not the pristine, proper. Maybe we should be a little bit more, have a little bit more couth in some of the things that we say, but we look at it and say being nice is not a sign of weakness. It's just the personality traits and the styles that we have. There's a quote in chapter 1 of my book that says, if you don't think nice guys finish first, then you don't know where the finish line is. And the reality of it is, you just, so many people are just going after this unrealistic. They're just attacking for the sake of attacking, and we don't spend enough time catching people in the act of doing something right. We don't spend enough time showing gratitude, empathy, compassion. The things that are really so important, not just in business, but in life in general. And it's amazing how many things can get tied back to success. If I look back to some of the relationships that I wasn't necessarily the perfect fit from a business perspective, but I had the right personality and style for that customer, and vice versa. So
absolutely. That's part of what's resonating with me, because I've spent a lot of time recently, interviewing guests and reading their books and so on that are talking about happiness and being nice and just the having empathy and just the ROI on that, for being a genuine human being, is pretty substantial.
Yeah, I think another guy that I've done a lot of following over the last couple of years is Gary Vaynerchuk, and he has this whole program that he did, or this whole part of a program they did. What's the ROI of your mother? There is no ROI necessarily that's attached that might have any metrics for being nice, but I can tell you, it makes me be able to put my head on the pillow at night and feel good about what I have done. Which ultimately affects my attitude, which ultimately affects my performance and my behavior. Hence, my business is run on my attitude.
Yeah, well, and to that point exactly about your mother is, the example I gave earlier about this public commentator, denigrating this 17-year-old kid for not getting into college, is a mother, is a woman. She's a mother.
Wow.
I mean, it's like, this is your point, and I feel the exact same thing. I still have sayings I always preface with, my mom taught me. It's like, so this is what she's teaching her sons. I mean,
yeah. My mom also said you can land a plane 90% correct and still kill everyone on board. So for me, it's 100% of the time. Like that woman, she probably has been 90% of the way in representing her side or her comments. She probably said the right thing. But, it takes 30 years to build a reputation and one stupid comment to wreck it. She just happened to not, in my mom's case, the 90-10 rule. She landed that plane and she was one of the 10% that did not land it properly. And she killed everyone on board, meaning she killed her reputation in the process. We just have to be all the time looking for the words, hearing the words that we're saying, and looking at the actions that we're taking, and living those words that we truly feel like, in my particular case, to be nice. So for me, that's the way it is.
Right. Well, and the point you made earlier, and this is, I think, really germane to the point we're going to get into here in the show, is that one thing about being nice and being a good person is this is how you build trust, right? We're building relationships, business relationships, buying relationships with our buyers and our customers. And, part of that aspect of building trust is for them to have, a good sense that your motives are clear, your motives are in the right place. You have some transparency in terms of your actions and your motives. And your actions and your words are in alignment. And if they're not, as you said, there are people that get by in life that are sleazy and so on. But for the overwhelming majority of us, these things are hugely important for connecting with another human being.
And what's so interesting about what you're saying is it's not just the actions that you put forth, but it's those that are in your network and that you hang out with also. Mm-hmm. So you have to be really careful. We just, before we opened up the microphone, we don't have to get into the specifics and started chatting, but it is all about, well, if you want to maintain a pristine reputation, or a reputation that you think is worthy of doing business with, mm-hmm. if you're talking about business, you need to associate with other people that you feel comfortable doing business with, to align yourself with that person that you don't want to spend the day in the canoe with. Right. Then it's challenging, because if you don't want to spend a day in a canoe with them, some other people are probably thinking the same thing, and they may not want to do business with that person either.
Yeah. Or if people are thinking that about us, right?
Possibly.
So, real look in the mirror moment. So one of the things you had written recently, which I wanted to delve into, which flows out of this topic, being nice, and is because to me, a lot of the thing about being nice, being a good person is attention to detail. And so you wrote an article about 4 steps to improve your professionalism. And I sort of wanted to go through these because, it's, you feel sometimes that people think that professionalism is like an outdated concept. And I don't believe that at all. In fact, I think it's one of these things that's becoming even more important, right, as a way to differentiate yourself in crowded, commoditized markets from your competition. Yeah. And especially as more and more, AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, automation comes into certainly the buying and selling process, you want to have those opportunities to engage with another individual. Those really become more valuable than they are even today. They're increasingly becoming valuable. So your professionalism really is and the things that it embodies really are critical. And I said, becoming more important in my mind.
No, I would completely agree with you. I just want to make one slight correction just to make sure that we're on the same page. I have an amazingly talented group of people that write and provide content for me also. This article does appear, and it was definitely approved and proofread and made sure it was all right. I did not specifically write the article, but I did agree. I just want to make sure, because I want to give everybody on my team the credit that they deserve.
Right. Well, who wrote it then?
Well, it probably was written by either Christopher Morales or someone else on my team, or it was a combination of several people. We have 7 people on our team, and I just want to make sure we get the right credit. I did approve of all of the categories. Sure. I would not post something on my site.
Well, shout out to Christopher Morales, or whoever wrote it. So the first element discussed in the article about increasing professionalism, improving, was to smarten your communications. And the thrust being is that, hey, again, this idea about paying attention to detail, easy things, right? I mean, communications, written communication, email, a text is oftentimes the first interactions you have with a prospective buyer. And we can go through the list of things that are just lazy behaviors that undercut what you're trying to, the relationship you're trying to build, the trust you're trying to build. Poor spelling, poor grammar, poor punctuation.
Oh gosh, all those things kill me.
Yeah. Bad use of words. And the thing is that this is not relegated to sales per se. I mean, I'm always amazed when I read an article online from, it could be on New York Times or Washington Post or ESPN or somewhere in sort of my browsing pattern, where they've got obvious copy editing errors that weren't caught. And it's sort of like, okay, are we just sort of accepting this is the way it needs to be, even in high profile publications? I mean, the fact is, every time you interact with a prospect, they're judging you. And if you're dealing with someone that has attention to detail, that thinks the details are important. Maybe you're selling them a mission critical piece of software. They're going to think less of your ability to meet their needs if you're just not paying attention to detail.
Well, you just hit it on the head, Andy. What you said was what you're writing is a reflection of who you are. And that's totally 100%. I can forgive a typo or a transposed letter every once in a while, maybe one, possibly even two per email. Nowadays with spell check, I don't even know if I'm quite as lenient as I used to be. But I did write an article, this was a couple of years ago, called Do You Suffer from Tonitis? And tonitis are the words that you're expressing in your post or in your text or in your email, is it being perceived as you meant to say it? And it's almost like before you hit that send button on that email that is potentially a conflict or at least a point of contention with the person on the receiving side, make sure that you are not personally attacking them. Make sure that you understand that they understand it's just business. Make sure the words that you're using, you've got to go beyond careful with the words that you're, especially nowadays, with everybody looking very carefully at, is this person judging me? Is this person attacking me? Is this going to be something that results in a lawsuit, legal department, especially on social media nowadays? Every word that you say needs to be carefully examined. And if you're sloppy about it, so to smarten your communication is definitely a step towards increasing your level of professionalism. I would wholeheartedly agree with that one as well.
Yeah, I like the term used, tonitis, because other than sounding like something you need to use Tinactin or something on your feet for, but is that a couple things to sort of come. One is the tone you talk about. This is really critical for when you think about having the ability to empathize with the buyer, developing your empathetic skills, is that you need to hear all of your communications the way the buyer is going to hear them. Just the point you made before is you need to put yourself in their shoes and say, okay, how are they hearing this? And this is a step that very few people take, and it takes a conscious effort. But the point you made, that's really a critical thing. And
there's a hashtag that is actually written right on my computer, right under the frame of my Mac, and the hashtag reminds me of perspective, because as we look through the generations, what that hashtag has meant, it's meant a tic-tac-toe board, it's meant a pound sign, it's meant a hashtag for social media. 3 of them at the end of a press release means end. You use that on an online chessboard, it means checkmate. It's a sharp sign in the music world. For different people looking at that hashtag, it all is different perspective. You've constantly got to examine what you are saying, the communication, the words that you're using under the hashtag of someone else's perspective to really understand and get what they want.
Yeah, and sort of lastly on that point about smart and I agree 100% on that. Lastly, sort of on smart in communications is, again, back to tonitis, is this premature familiarity. And hey, buddy, hey, pal, hey. And I'd written an article within the last couple of years saying, hey, the headline was, hey, I'm not your buddy. And again, it's just doing exactly or not doing exactly what you said people need to do, which is, how are they receiving this? When I say, hey, pal, I don't know, it's just something within me. I've never done that in my entire life, or buddy or something. Maybe it's just the way I was trained. But even today, it just strikes people wrong. And
you just have to be very careful. You have to be extremely careful when you say, and I find myself using this a lot with closer communications with people. I use the word brother. If it's somebody that is my brother, thank you, my brother. And oftentimes, it sometimes is a matter of culturally where I am from and who I am, that it may be perceived differently from the receiver. It may be received in some cases as a religious connotation where I don't want it to be received that way. So when in doubt, err on the safe side. I would just tell you that.
Try their first name.
Yeah, try their first name. Right. You're right. Right.
People enjoy that.
So
another one in the article that, again, I think some people might perceive as being old-fashioned is about how you dress.
Yeah.
And it seems sort of, I came of age in my career where we first generation to really make that transition from wearing suits every day to wearing jeans and shorts every day. But you see in certain cases in certain industries where it feels like it's coming back, dressing up. And again, I think it's dressing to the appropriate for the audience. It doesn't necessarily mean a three-piece suit, but dressing nicely is, so as I said, sort of coming back, making a little bit of a renaissance.
Well, you have to realize that there is no case in which you would dress better than the crowd that you are performing in front of or talking to or meeting with. There is never a case where if you overdress, it will be inappropriate. But there's always a case that if you underdress, it will be inappropriate. So again, like your error on the side of safe communication, error on the side of overdressing to the audience that you're about to sit in front of. You can always take off a tie. You can always roll up your sleeves. You can always take off a jacket, but you can't produce a tie, a jacket, or shirt sleeves if you need to. Yeah,
I was given sort of the rule of thumb early in my career is you dress one level better than the people you're meeting with.
Yes.
And just for safety. And I just think it's a good rule, as you talked about, is, maybe if you go into a extremely informal company and you're wearing a three-piece suit, and the engineers may say, who is this yo-yo? But rarely happens. You said you can take the tie off. You can say, hey, I didn't understand, so on. But just think about one step above your audience.
The only time I would take exception to that rule, and this is only with an extremely limited part of our population, is when you have become an icon or an influencer, or your brand is built upon the way that you look. Again, I'll use Gary Vee as the motto. Yeah. If you're iconic in that regard, then I would say it still is a good idea. You certainly would be impressing someone if you were dressing based upon their attendance or their audience. They would respect that even more so than, oh, here comes that guy in the black turtleneck. But it's never a bad idea to dress, like you said, at or above the level that your audience is dressing.
Yeah, I worked at Apple in the early days of Apple, and one day we were hosting. This was right at the time when IBM PC got introduced, and Apple, we were panicked about losing corporate business or not being able to get corporate business, and this was well before the Mac, and not that too far advanced, but the Mac wasn't in existence at that time. But actually, we were holding sneak previews for large corporations to come in and see the Mac and what was called the Lisa, which was sort of the upscale Mac. And one day, a friend of mine who had responsibility for that had the IT manager or IT vice president of Amoco, Chevron of Illinois, or Standard Oil of Illinois at that time, and come in, and he was going to see these things under deep non-disclosure. And we got about halfway into the meeting. That's going reasonably well. And the guy was pretty skeptical about Apple, as most companies were at that point. We were only $300-400 million company at that point. And in walks Steve Jobs with cut off blue jean shorts and a tank top. And he had dressed that way to come meet this guy who was in his three-piece suit, very conservative guy from Chicago who ran IT, and I'm sure spent multiple billions of dollars a year with IBM. And he was distinctly unimpressed. I'm sure. I think Steve, in this particular case, built a culture on that dress and that style. Well,
and
he learned and improved. I mean, he was very stylishly dressed in his black turtleneck.
His black turtleneck, right? Exactly. Yeah. Beyond that, right? Yeah, exactly.
He clearly didn't want to wake up and make any decisions about what to wear, and that's perfect. I'm sure Gary Vee and I know others are similar. So, other things I thought were interesting to add to that list about increasing your professionalism was, and we really covered it, is be a good person, be nice. And so for you, how do you define nice?
Interesting. You asked that question. I define it as a part of the actions and the habits that I've created for myself every day. And while nice can certainly be things like showing gratitude and catching people in the act of doing something right and having empathy and compassion, I define it through many of the actions that I go through. Being a nice partner in business means, or a nice person to deal with in business means that I'm returning all of my phone calls, returning my emails, answering all the questions within the emails on time every time for my appointments without exception. not over delivering and under promising, but instead exceeding expectations every time, and reaching out and communicating. And those with the people that are in my life that I haven't on a regular basis, let's say, those 5 things that I just mentioned are this program that I have called the Nice Guy 30. Try doing all 5 of those things: returning your calls, your emails on time, every time, stop over promising and under delivering, and communicating with a couple of people a day you haven't communicated with in the last 30 days. Those 5 things done over a period of 30 days will greatly improve the communication and the relationships and the business in your life. And that's the stuff that I would consider. How do you define the habits of a nice person? Those 5 habits to me make up being a nice guy.
Okay, so let's go through those again.
Sure. Number one, return your phone calls.
Wow.
It's such a simple one. Revolutionary, right? I do keynote speaking all over the country, and I say nothing I'm going to tell you today is going to be rocket science, but I guarantee you, if I polled everybody in this audience and said, do you return every phone call? I guarantee you that most people in this room do not return every phone call. Now, there's some exceptions. It could be things like telemarketing calls or spammy calls. You don't have to return those.
Right. But I mean, the thing is that increasingly, though, is people, certainly, I'll say in millennials, because my kids do this, is, they don't leave voicemails anymore. I got a snarky text from my daughter if I leave her a voicemail. So you see that, and you see people sort of encouraging that, because I know an increasing number of people that just fill up their voicemail box and then they keep it full, so you can't leave a message for them.
Well, what I found happens is so few people nowadays even call me, that this first one has been something that I don't have to necessarily worry about quite as much. But the next one, which is returning all of your emails, and then the B to that is making sure you answer all of the questions within the email that you've just gotten. Somebody sends you an email and sends you 4 questions, and you answer 2 of them. That means you have 2 that are outstanding, and that means that you're leaving yourself open for another email. You may as well. I have someone that I deal with professionally all the time. I have to bullet point to her the questions that I have, because the only way that I know I'm going to get responses if I write them out is in bullet point. Because if I do it in paragraphs, she's not going to respond.
Well, and that gets back to smartening up your communications. I think that's,
right.
But I think that's a key lesson for people to think about. And I do this and I've had people complain about it. Looks like you hit carriage return after every sentence. And it's like, yeah, I kind of do. Because just the point that you talked about is, it's like people don't read paragraphs anymore.
Right.
They do in fiction and so on. But in business communication, they want to be able to scan. And if you're in paragraphs, it's harder to scan. So I break things out into, I'll sometimes have multi-sentence paragraphs, but a lot of them are just a single sentence.
It makes sense. So returning your calls, returning your emails, and answering the questions, that's number 2. Number 3, again, something that I think that most people unfortunately don't do is be on time every single time, no matter what. And if you feel like there's going to be any, somebody calls me at 11:05 and says, hey, I'm running late for an 11 o'clock appointment. I realize that because you're not here. But you knew probably 15 minutes before that you weren't going to be here. So just give me the heads up and just send me the text message that says, hey, I'm running late. I apologize. Should we reschedule, or are you okay if I run a few minutes late?
Exactly. Well, this gets back to one of our mother's stories, or at least one of my mother's stories, is, that was drilled into me by my mom very early in life. And heaven forbid we were ever late coming home from wherever we were, if we weren't out with friends at the mall or out on a date. And, this was before cell phones. So, we had to find a phone if we were going to be late. And usually that wasn't good enough to say I'm going to be a few minutes late. Usually it had to be
you had to be on time. You had to be on time. And
they sort of ran like Vince Lombardi time. If you remember Vince, coach of the Green Bay Packers, the joke was that, if he said 11 o'clock for him meant 10:50.
Yeah, on time is late. And if you think that, then you'll be in good shape. I promise you, no one is going to get irritated with you if you are waiting outside the appointment 10 minutes before you get there. Don't pressure that person by showing up a half hour early and sitting there. Just wait, but just do what you need to do to be on time.
Yeah. This is not an old-fashioned virtue. This is something that a lot of these things we're talking about is
timeless.
Well, it's timeless, but it's respecting the other person's time, your buyer's time. If you're in sales and they ask the customer, send you an email with 4 questions, your answer to, as Doug talked about, A, they're going to be disappointed in your ability to live up to commitments to answer questions, but B, they're saying the signals, I just don't respect your time.
And that gets
communicated very clearly.
That's part of the entire process, is that if you started this way, what kind of a person are you going to be to deal with in business beyond the sale, when it gets into the support side of things? And you want to be that person that is beyond reproach. I have an agency that represents me in my DJ business, and if they get a call,
witness the DJ Doug over his right shoulder there,
right there, right. So and I've been in that business for 30 years, and I've done 75 to 100 functions a year for the last 30 years, 20 with the same agency, so a couple thousand functions with this agency. If they get a call from a customer saying, we tried to reach Doug and he didn't return our call, they do not say, we're really sorry that Doug didn't return the call. They say, you must not have Doug's phone number right, because I have never been not returned a phone call. So that's the kind of stuff that makes for a positive reputation. That's the kind of reputation that you want to have. So return calls, return emails, be on time every time. Next one, next to that little hashtag on my computer is a sign that says, set unrealistic expectations and then exceed them. Rather than overpromise and underdeliver, every expectation, if you say, I'm going to have that proposal to you at 5 p.m. and 5 p.m. comes and goes and you don't, you're again setting false expectations with that customer. I'd much rather say, I'll have it to you at 5 and actually by noon that day have that proposal to them.
Right.
When you do stuff like that, they start to depend on you or they trust you, they become loyal to you, they want to do business, not because you have this amazing, great new product, but because you actually do what you say that you're going to do.
Yeah, you lived up to your commitments. That's what people want. And that is an essential element of building trust. And what you want to do in a sales process is, when you're building a relationship with a customer, is you want to have insert in there those opportunities to demonstrate your ability to live up to commitments.
It's a great test. It's a great test, not only for them to see if you do your job, but for you to prove to them how well you can excel at those things that are needed in order to not only make a sale, but to follow through and support the sale as well.
Right. Okay. So last one.
Communicate with people on a regular basis you haven't spoken to in the last few weeks, the last 30 days. I wrote this article for the Huffington Post called 24 Seconds That Will Change Your Life. It's all about sending out 2 text messages to people that you have not spoken to in the last 30 days. And what that is demonstrating is your ability to tie those thin threads of relationships into thicker cords, into steel cables, so that over the course of time, you're top of mind aware. And what they are sending back to you is a complete telltale sign of the type of person you are. For example, if you send a message out to someone you haven't spoken to in the last 30 days and you get the response, "Who is this?" it means you're not a good communicator. If the second response that you get is everything okay, it means that you probably only reach out in the event of an emergency, and that's not good either. But the one that you really want to get is the one that said, "Man, thanks for communicating. Thanks for getting back to me," or "Thanks for sharing. I'm glad that you reached out to me." Those are the kind of things, those feel-good moments, as my son would call it, it gets them right in the feels. Those are the moments that you're looking for to build better relationships with people, because as the subtitle of my book, Nice Guys Finish First, will say, better relationships equal better business. And that is all we're trying to do, is better the relationships by those 5 steps, including that last one, which is better communication with the people in your life.
And these are really essential. And there's been sort of interesting quasi pushback from some quarters in the sales blogosphere recently about the value of relationships, and the whole discussion's gotten muddied. But the fact is, relationships, you're not making friends out of people. These are functional relationships that you need to develop in order to have anything happen in the world, in business, or even in your personal life. So when we talk about relationships, again, these are things that make things happen, the relationships that make things happen. It's not necessarily becoming your buddy or your friend. It's a functional thing. Relationship is defined as 2 things sort of acting together. And it could be 2 pieces of machinery, or it could be 2 human beings. But there is that relationship, and it's undeniable. And things that Doug has talked about in terms of living up to your commitment, exceeding expectations, doing the simple things, really make a huge difference. So, Doug, great to talk to you as always.
Thanks, Andy. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited for this new format of the show. I'm looking forward to. So, any idea when the new format is going to begin?
Well, people listening to this, they'll be listening to it. So, with this episode,
all right. So you're hearing it roll out. Congratulations on your show and all the successes. I'm looking forward to hearing more.
You and your show, tell us people about your podcast before you go.
Yeah, feel free to tune in. The Nice Guys on Business podcast. We're a 5-day-a-week format right now. We do interviews 3 of the days, and me and my co-host just kind of discussing business ideas, everyday life. Just 2 best friends having a conversation about how to do better in this life and how to be nicer.
Which is a good thing to talk about, right?
We feel so.
Yeah, that's definitely a good thing to talk about. All right, Doug, great to talk to you. We'll look forward to having you back on soon.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks again.
Thank you, Doug. Again, that was Doug Sandler, author of the book titled Nice Guys Finish First, and co-host of the Nice Guys on Business podcast. Joining me next, my fantastic co-host, Bridget Gleason. Now, since we've moved our weekly get-togethers from Friday to Wednesday, Bridget has given me the task of coming up with a name for our segment. I mean, it used to be Frontline Fridays, and now that we're on Wednesdays, we need a name that has that same alliteration to it that Frontline Fridays had. So, does anybody have any ideas? I mean, she gave me the task of coming up with it, but I could really use your help. So if you have an idea what we could call our Wednesday segment, then please go ahead and shoot that over to me. I appreciate any support you can provide. Now today, Bridget and I tackle the topic of respect. You can't command respect. You don't automatically have my respect just because you have a fancy title or vice versa. Respect needs to be earned. And unfortunately, it's so easy in sales to inadvertently communicate to your buyers that you don't respect them, you don't respect their time, their opinion, and so on. Even if that was not your intent. I mean, every time your buyer receives a sales email where they don't even make a pretense, the sender, right, doesn't even make a pretense of having done even the slightest amount of research on the buyer beforehand, then the buyer feels like you don't respect their time. And if that's the first impression you're making on them, then that's a really hard place to recover from. You may never get a second opportunity. So we're going to talk about this importance of respect. Bridget, how are you doing?
Andy, I'm doing super fantastic.
Has to be super fantastic.
Super, yes. No complaints. I don't know if I mentioned last time, we had a great quarter. We're starting off on a new one. I know that these don't coincide exactly with when they're aired, but it feels good to have a good one behind us and have a good start to a fresh quarter. So feeling good about things.
Yeah. So did you get your run in this morning?
Is the Pope Catholic?
I just wanted to see.
Does it snow in Boston in April?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes, I did get my run in, and you?
I'm going to be hopping on the Peloton here before too long. Getting my bike ride in for today. That's nice.
I'm not an end of the day athlete. Like, I like to do it in the morning, have it done. An end of the day doesn't work. I won't do it. I get lazy. I think I'm lazy at heart.
Yeah, I normally try to get it done in the morning, but some days, just sort of works out. But yeah, I'm trying to have a sort of streak of how many days in a row I can be on the bike. Because we just did our bike training camp, my wife and I last month, and or at the tail end of last month, and so I've got the bike bug again. Because I don't oftentimes I oftentimes don't get 7 days where 7 days in a row I can go out and go do long rides. And so trying to maintain sort of that level of fitness in winter in New York is not always easy on the bike, but the Peloton bike, gosh, I'm in love with it. Recommend people check it out if they like the idea of riding indoors and staying in touch with their bike during winter.
I've heard so many people talk about it.
The one piece of exercise equipment I've owned in my life that I can say that I've more than got my money out of. Unlike most of the treadmills and ordinary stationary bikes and so on that just sort of sat in a corner after a while.
This one gets used.
Oh, yeah. Both my wife and I use it a lot. So I think I'm one away. I think I'm at ride 199 or something like that. So I've almost one more for my 200th ride.
That's great.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, as I said, it's come down off the thrill and excitement of doing a lot of big bike rides and get back at least you can spin your legs. So, we'd had a challenge. You had challenged me, and we sort of have to talk about is so since the show no longer airs on Friday, though people could be listening to it on Friday, but it's released on Wednesdays.
I know. I really like the Frontline Friday. Okay, yeah. Here's the challenge. What is it?
So we both agreed we like the alliteration of Frontline Friday. Is what what can we say about Wednesdays?
Okay, and did you look up some?
Well, you had said, what are the synonyms for fantastic? And yeah, they're not very good. There's weird, whimsical, and wacky.
Weird Wednesday, whimsical, wacky.
Don't want to
think about it. I'm going to think about it.
Okay.
I'm going to think about it. Because I think you did a good one.
All right. Well, that can be your assignment for a future episode.
And what I need is assignments.
Just what you need is more work.
That's what I need.
Well, this one doesn't have a strict deadline, so I think you're in good shape.
All right. Good.
So a topic I want to talk about today is this, and guys, it's come up a lot recently in the news and sort of filters into everything we do is this idea of respect. And I started thinking about it because right after the Parkland shootings, the unfortunate event in Florida, is there some commentator at some news network, they'll go unnamed, took offense with the way the Parkland students sort of confronted Marco Rubio and said, hey, what are you going to do about this issue? And this commentator sent out a tweet saying, parents, what would you do if your children lecture and ridicule a U.S. senator? And a very conservative commentator responded back with another tweet. I'd get a bumper sticker on my car that said "Proud Parent," and it got me to think about this whole idea: is that just because someone is a senator or an elected official, does that automatically mean they're due our respect? And we're going to get this. I'm going to follow this trail into sales because I remember early on in my life, things your parents taught you, things my mother taught me is you can't demand respect. It needs to be earned. And it's like, well, okay. I start looking then into sales and saying all these instances where this idea of respecting the people we're dealing with seems to go out the window. And, I see this in the context of interactions. Like I receive dozens of emails every day from sales reps, as I'm sure you do, and others do. And I'll have to admit, I put my name on lists deliberately in order to experience what sales is like from the customer perspective. But it seems like a lot of the behaviors we engage in sort of have this sort of lack of respect for the time, sometimes even the intelligence of the buyers. And so and I was just wondering, I think this is to some degree a change that's happened over matter of years because technology's enabled certain ways of outreaching to customers that we didn't have before. I'm just wondering, do you sort of get the sense there's sort of like a diminishment of the respect that sellers have for buyers, and that it sort of gets communicated to the buyers, and it's making their task harder.
It's funny. I think that I hear more about sellers or sellers feeling like buyers don't respect them.
Oh yeah, it goes both ways for sure. I was going to get to that. Yeah. I was just starting on this one.
Yeah, first. It just makes me wonder if it's not this unvirtuous cycle. I think. So I'm coming at it just from the other angle of a seller not feeling respected, or that the buyer feels that they have anything of value to add. That sets up a bad dynamic. Mm-hmm. And I think also, I know as a buyer, I feel very disrespected or frustrated when, for example, I am and maybe it's more in customer service is an example, but it also happens in sales when I feel like the seller hasn't done the research or taken the time to know, like review what I'm looking for. Like when I've already given it, when I feel like they don't value my time or they don't take me seriously. So I think I don't know if this is a pervasive trend, but I've seen it and experienced it.
Yeah, I just wonder if we're
frustrating.
Yeah, I just wonder if we're building this into sort of basic sales behavior in a way that makes the task, unnecessarily difficult. I mean, I got an email this week from the CEO of a company, relatively new company, software company, and it was a pitch to include some mention of their company's product in an upcoming blog post that I was going to write. Now, the thing that was funny is the first line was, "Oh, really enjoy your blog and all the comments you make and da 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 da." Well, maybe as you know, I don't blog very frequently these days. I have this podcast, and we've produced well over 650 of these so far. So I was like, okay, well, somehow you knew that I was a quote unquote thought leader, but hadn't bothered to do the research, or I'm sure his marketing department had put this together or something to say, or to understand that as, a podcaster, I have a pretty big audience for the podcast and a big social following, and just completely blew it. That's like, if you want to, and I sent him a nice email back. I said, I get the point that this was an email blast, but I'm interested in your product. It looks kind of interesting. I said, but just doing this type of emails, I use the word, that's kind of lazy selling. I said, if you'd like to research me and write back with a pitch about being on my show, let me know. And I haven't heard back.
That's good though. I think it's good that you called it out.
Yeah, because it was, I think, showed a lack of respect for the receiver of the email. I'm sure I'm not the only one that has a similar reaction to that type of thing. And it's like, why do something so counterproductive? If you wanted nobody to respond to it, fine. But as I said, I get every day, I get a handful of pitches from people to wanting to be on my podcast. And the ones that stand out are the ones that would stand out if they're a great email from an SDR. They're clearly been personalized. There've been a level of research done that showed that they, were familiar with who I was, and opened my eyes, and I'd read it.
Yeah, it's important. It's. I think it's really important in any human interaction that we, this showing respect for someone's time and who they are. It may look differently, but I think sometimes sales, we forget that it boils down to one human and another human. And the more, I just think people who are respectful and have just sort of a natural curiosity, also we've talked about before, but feel that it's you've got someone else who you're interacting with, whose time is valuable, what they're interested in is valuable, this process that they're kind of undergoing as they're doing their evaluation is valuable. And you just start off with a better sort of tone if you enter into every conversation and interaction being mindful of that. I think I've seen those reps who just end up having better results. You can feel it. You can sense it. You don't even have to say it. You can just tell by the tone that this is somebody who is genuinely interested, wants the right thing for me. That's a good feeling.
What I sense about it is that these are people who care.
Right.
Right. I mean, and I think that's an aspect of respect that people don't think enough about, is that it's demonstrating that you're caring. If you send an email and you've got 3 different fonts in it, or you've got these obvious spelling errors or grammatical errors, you're communicating this idea that you really care. And if you don't care, then why are you wasting my time by sending this to me? Or, saying that from the voice of the buyer. Because it does make a difference. And so I think that and it's like the overfamiliarity that we see on calls, mostly from guys. I don't know why it's a guy thing versus male versus female, but, using the buddy or the pal. I never have a woman calling me, a salesperson calling me saying, pal. but that sort of undue familiarity, again, is I understand sort of a nervous tick people have, but does sort of show that a lack of caring for not monitoring that when you're talking about it.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking, maybe women have something similar that they do, but you're right. There can be that familiarity with, guys, how you do. And sometimes they'll do it. They will say it, but it would also be directed at women. It comes across a little bit differently, but it's sort of a funny thing.
Well, is there something similar? I mean, I granted, the vast majority of the sales outreach I get, the one on the phone are with males, right? That's just sort of the unfortunate division of the labor pool in sales. But are there verbal tics like that women have?
My guess is there are. I'm just trying to think of, there's fewer of us to pay attention to. Like I even think about in the office, we have females in the office, but they're more men. I'm sure there are things that maybe they're not as pronounced.
Well, it's not like a waitress at a diner calling you honey.
No.
I've had one female salesperson call me honey. It wasn't in tech. It was I forget what it was. It might have been banking or something. I don't know. But it's very rare.
I think where I would say that I see it shows up is sometimes I'll help sales reps write emails, or they'll come to me to ask for editing. And there are times when I'll say, okay, let me drive. And I'll write the email. And I'll say, I'm just going to write it, and then you make it yours. Mm-hmm. And when you read my version sounds like one big exclamation point. It reads like an exclamation point and smiley face. And it's,
hi, this is Bridget.
And they read it and say, I would never say it that way. I said, that's why I'm telling you to edit it. So I guess I see more of the differences when I think about writing styles. I see them being very different.
But an interesting point is maybe they should, right? I mean, I think there's one of the things that maybe male salespeople could learn is maybe they should just send it. I mean, I think there's sensitivity thinking like, yeah, that sounds too much like a woman. I would never say that. And I just think that's BS. I mean, it's if it's professional or not, try it. Yeah, try it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes they do try it, but sometimes it's just so clearly, like you can tell this is written by a different person. It doesn't have their voice. So I think there's a balance between trying something new and feeling and being inauthentic. I think
sure.
if it feels like, yeah, I'm going to try it. I don't normally communicate that way, but I agree with that sentiment, or I feel that way, or that feels still authentic to me, even though I don't tend to write that way. I think that's, I would say give that a shot.
Yeah, no, I was just urging salespeople is
get out of the comfort zone,
get out of the comfort zone. We talked in the previous episode is unless what you're doing is knocking it out of the park every time, right? Your email's just converting at such a high rate. You think there's nothing you can learn, which right. I suspect there are very few that way, is try something like this. Yeah, sometimes, especially when we're younger in our career, this quote-unquote voice we think we've developed that is authentic to us is, it's like we're like, I'd use the analogy like, adolescent boys whose voice is still developing, right? And it cracks, and it's what it is today isn't what it's going to end up to be. So experiment.
Yeah, it's good. And see what comes back.
Yeah.
All right, we sort of got off track, but still good stuff. So, unfortunately, we have to wrap it up.
Wow.
All right. So, Bridget, as always, fantastic to talk with you, and we will be back next week.
Looking forward to it, Andy. Have a great one. Enjoy New York.
Yeah, on my way to San Diego tomorrow. So,
okay.
Escaping.
All right. All right.
Talk to you next
week.
week.
Enjoy that. Okay.
Okay, friends, that was Accelerate for this week. First of all, I want to thank you for joining me, and I want to thank my guests, Doug Sandler and my friend Bridget Gleason. Join me again next week as I welcome Alan Adamson to Accelerate. Alan is the author of an interesting book titled Shift Ahead, How the Best Companies Stay Relevant in a Fast-Changing World. It's really a fascinating look at the challenges involved with staying relevant to your buyers in an era of rapid and unceasing change. And of course, no Accelerate would be complete without a contribution from Bridget. And as always, she'll be joining me for our weekly conversation. So be sure to join me then. Thanks again to our sponsor, Discover.org, for their ongoing support of Accelerate. And thank you again for joining me. Until next week, good selling, everyone,